this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this evening. We're going to start tonight's discussion with a clip, and then I'm going to introduce our presenter and the series, and just small ground rules. Okay, so we're going to just start with this clip. Before I do that, welcome to From Whence We Came, Cultural Food and Candid Conversations. And today's discussion will be about social activism and students and youth being active. So with that said, I thought it was appropriate that I share something that I saw trying to look for music that was appropriate, and instead I found the children of Birmingham in the civil rights movement. So here we go.
No more
In 1963, a century after the Emancipation Proclamation, the United States was still a nation divided. Segregation kept blacks and whites in separate worlds, which were anything but equal.
It would take the courage and sacrifice of the young and innocent to shock a nation that believed itself the bastion of democracy into truly making America a place with liberty and justice for all.
The time had come to say, no more.
No more. No more.
Declared that separate was inherently unequal and that integration ought to proceed with all deliberate speed. Not everyone agreed.
And I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
In Birmingham, Alabama, desegregation was a dangerous business, no matter what the courts said. With more than 20 unsolved bombings between 1957 and 1963 and KKK associates in positions of power, Birmingham was a stronghold of racial oppression and intimidation. After his setback in Albany, Georgia, Martin Luther King arrived in Birmingham on April 3, 1963, for a make-or-break battle of the dying civil rights movement.
Project C got off to a disappointing start. A court injunction against parading and an 800% increase in bail costs made a trip to jail more likely to last 6 months than 6 days. Marchers realistically feared losing their jobs and their homes. Few volunteered. Fewer were arrested. On April 12th, King tried to draw people by marching himself. He and Ralph Abernathy went to jail. In King's absence, jive-talking James Bevel held the floor at the mass meetings and struck a chord with the young people who didn't have jobs or own homes. They began to volunteer in droves. Bevel started a whisper campaign for student demonstrations. When King was released on April 20th, he was highly conflicted over the use of children as marchers. Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth, however, summed up the situation when he said, "We gotta use what we got."
Black parents tried to shield their children from the harsh reality of segregation, but it wasn't always possible.
March of 63, they blew up the church next door to the house. My father's car was set on fire. He was also ran off a bridge one night. It was tough.
One of the worst nights of Chris McNair's life was when he had to tell his daughter the reason he couldn't buy her the sandwich she'd wanted at a store that day was that she was black. Still, they hoped. When Barbara Cross and her family moved to Birmingham in 1962, her father, Reverend John Cross, tried to get into a taxi.
And he said, "We don't carry your kind." My father told him, "Before I leave Alabama, you'll be carrying anyone who wants to catch a cab."
Civil rights photographer Charles Moore remembers his father saying, "Son, you don't treat people poorly because they are a different color." Other white children were not so lucky. spoon-fed hatred and lies of black inferiority, and prevented by segregation from befriending black children, many believed what they'd been taught. White student Charles Entrekin pointed out that people breathe in the prejudices of their culture without any understanding of what they're taking in. It takes something to wake them up. The children of Birmingham were about to wake up the entire nation. On May 2nd, DJ Shelley the Playboy announced, "Kids, there's gonna be a party at the park." It was a signal. Black students of all ages climbed out classroom windows and over fences.
They called it D-Day for the demonstrate the day at 12 o'clock noon. I know we were all leaving school.
Some children walked as much as 18 miles to congregate at the 16th Street Baptist Church, site of mass meetings and nonviolent training for the movement. They would face the police they'd been taught to fear. At 1 p.m., James Bevel began sending them out in groups of 50 towards City Hall.
We was the first group out of the church. We got about 4 or 5 blocks and we were stopped by the police. Bull Connor came up and they put those so-and-sos in the car. And when they stopped us, the fear.
Bull Connor and the police were waiting and herded the children into paddy wagons and off to jail. After an hour, they had to commandeer school buses. 973 children were arrested. On their best day, the adult demonstrators had managed 32.
Went to jail, stayed 9 days. My experience in jail was horrible.
Cells meant for 50 now held as many as 300 children. Officers beat bodies back from the door with a chain in order to open it far enough to admit more prisoners. While D-Day had yielded many arrests, the events of the day were fairly non-violent. That would not be true of Double D-Day. Once again, students came by the thousands. This time, policemen were waiting with German shepherds and fire hoses. For an hour, students were quietly arrested. But Connor was running out of jail cells. He needed to scare them into stopping. Firemen doubled the water pressure to 100 pounds per square inch. Bull Connor gave the word to let him have it. The water literally blew children off their feet and swept them down the sidewalks. Witnessing this, black millionaire A.G. Gaston interrupted his phone conversation saying, "I can't talk. My people are out there fighting for their lives and my freedom. I have to help them."
Carolyn Mall and 2 other students took shelter against the wall of a nearby building. The water tore her sweater and ripped hair from her scalp. Charles Moore was there to capture the events on film. The water had scattered the students, but as the noise died down, a small group of students still standing could be heard singing, "Freedom." The students regrouped. Police dogs were set on the marchers and even some of the bystanders. Spectators, demonstrators, firemen, and policemen were sent to the hospital. 1,922 children were sent to jail, but the jail was full. They filled the jail yard and were taken to the fairgrounds and locked in the stock pens. Most would stay for 1 to 2 weeks. Wherever they were imprisoned, the songs of the movement rang out and gave them courage.
The effects of the Children's March came quickly, beginning on Miracle Sunday, when parents and children marched together. In spite of Connor's order, the firemen refused to attack. More than 20,000 students had skipped school to go to jail. By May 10th, the businesses of Birmingham had had enough and agreed to desegregate. As children returned to school, however, they were informed that they had been expelled. The school board's decision was appealed all the way to the district court in Atlanta before it was overturned and the students were readmitted.
On May 17th, Life magazine published an 11-page spread of Charles Moore's photos of the Children's March. More than half the country read it. In 186 cities across the country, people marched in support of the youth of Birmingham. In the White House, the photos sickened President Kennedy, who, bolstered by the courage of the children, at last called for change.
The events in Birmingham and elsewhere have so increased the cry for equality that I shall ask the Congress of the United States to act to the proposition that race has no place in American life or law.
On July 23rd, Birmingham repealed its segregation ordinances, and in August, the March on Washington showed the movement was national. That fall, the schools of Birmingham were integrated, but after all these successes, the children would be asked to make one more sacrifice. On the morning of September 15th, 1963, just as the Sunday school classes were ending and youth were preparing to usher on this special Youth Sunday, dynamite ripped through the 16th Street Church.
I had planned to go to the bathroom with my friend, and my teacher stopped me and gave me an assignment. I saw Annie to see you in a little while. 15 minutes after I heard the blast, it was a horrible noise. Ground was shaking under us. Something hit me in my head, and I was screaming. And I heard all the kids screaming. Everybody running outside, crying and looking for their loved one.
5 girls in the basement women's restroom were buried under 30-inch thick pieces of the wall. 4 of them died.
My dad saw a gaping hole in the basement where the bricks were blown away. And so when they started digging, and after about 2 or 3 feet, they found the girl's body blown together.
The nation was appalled. The need for change was painfully clear. There could be no more Birminghams. The tide of support for civil rights swelled, flowing into Washington and pushing the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which outlawed segregation. The next year, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 resecured rights that had been part of law but not part of life for a century.
I like to say to my friends, through that bloodshed, that was a down payment of freedom. That was a down payment on history.
The courage and sacrifice of the children finally broke the back of the rule of fear and hatred.
Their innocent hope and bravery revived a dying civil rights movement and changed the future of their world.
They would be afraid no more.
Okay, thank you. I know a very solemn way to start the program, but that's history. That's this country's history. And that leads to why we thought this was an important program to have. Last semester, well, actually in the summer, when we were having these town hall meetings in reaction, giving our students a safe space to express themselves in reaction to George Floyd and the climate in the country. One young man expressed that he didn't feel proud to be an African American, and he says, "What do we have to be proud about?" And from that, again, that was my calling card. That well, you just don't know your history, and if you don't know your history, then maybe people that don't look like you don't know the history either. So we need to do more of sharing this history. Many times, because the history is so ugly, we don't talk about it. But that doesn't mean that it's going to go away. And if we don't learn from the history and from the mistakes of the past, then we will likely repeat it. So we thought it was important to have this discussion. And in the African American culture, many times we are the history and our traditions would be passed, at Sunday dinner, in the kitchen, helping someone else with the meal, and so our history was passed orally from generation to generation. And what's happened is we have these things, right? These phones, and so people don't really just sit down and talk. They eat, or they go somewhere else and they eat with their phones out. So what's happening, there's more of a disconnect, and it is our hope today to have more of a discussion. And so that was the thought process, the motivation behind this series of From Whence We Came: Cultural, Food, and Candid Conversations. Okay, so with that said, I'm just going to give the slight rules. If you would like to ask a question, please, I ask that you wave your hand or put something in the chat. Now, I'm hoping that everyone knows how to raise their hand. If not, you just go to that little smiley face at the bottom that says reactions. And when you press on that, there you'll see a choice that says raise hands. So once you do that, then we'll know that you have a question. All right. And this is supposed to be just a very, what do you call this? Just a very free flowing conversation. I believe that's what the presenter prefers. And I can't wait for you to meet him. So tonight's presenter is Charles Fox. He is the Director of Diversity and Development for the Legal Aid Society of Suffolk County, Incorporated. Mr. Fox has spent nearly 20 years in community, not-for-profit work. Really, 20 years? That makes me older. Anyway, I digress. It can't be 20 years. It must be a typo. Okay. But he says it's been nearly 20 years in the community for not-for-profit work in education and youth development. Mr. Fox holds an associate's degree in international business from Suffolk County Community College, whoop, whoop. A bachelor's degree in political science / Africana studies, and a master's degree in public policy from Stony Brook University. Mr. Fox is also past president of the African American Student Union, and he was very active when he was a student here at Suffolk County Community College, and we've been in contact ever since. So every time I ask him to impart his knowledge, he says, "I'm busy, but I'll do it for you." So without further ado, let's hear for Mr. Charles Fox.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Can everybody hear me okay? Because I never know if I'm coming through. Can you hear me? Okay, perfect. First of all, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. It's like Malika said, it's always, whenever she asks me to participate in something she's doing, I jump at the opportunity because I know that she's genuine. Her, Mr. Banks, the entire staff at Suffolk County Community College, it's an honor and a privilege to present and talk and have conversations. And I really want to stress for tonight, my preference is that we have a conversation. I don't know about you all, but I've been on so many webinars, so many PowerPoint presentations since COVID started, and I am all PowerPointed and webinared out. I'm ready for actual conversations. I see some familiar faces and names in the Zoom. So please, if you have a question or a comment, we just ask obviously that you raise your hand, but please share your thoughts, because we cannot have a conversation about activism and the importance of making your voice heard for those of you that are young and those of you that are young at heart. We can't have that conversation if I just drone on for an hour from my kitchen. So we need to make sure that we are engaging with one another. And aside from just hearing one another, we need to actually listen to one another. And I know Malika touched on some kind of ground rules. Whenever I speak to an audience, or speak with an audience, I should say, my only rule is that we respect one another. That's really it. We have to start from a base level of, we all have different perspectives. We all have different points of view, but we have to respect where one another is coming from. And I know that when we talk about Black history, when we talk about some of the trauma that we've endured as a people in this country, and trauma that we continue to endure in this country, as we've seen in recent months and years, we have to make sure that we're being respectful of that history and to treat it with the reverence that it requires and that it deserves. Can we all agree to be respectful of one another? Can we all agree to trust one another? I see head shaking. Okay, I'm gonna take that as a yes. Now you may see that y'all are in my home. You're in my kitchen. So usually when I do a Zoom meeting, and I'm not sure who's all on the Zoom meeting, I'll do a virtual background. So you might see me in Cabo St. Lucia. You might see me in Jamaica or something. It's just a virtual background. But for tonight, we're family. I'm letting you into my home. This is about culture. This is about cooking. I want to make sure that everybody feels welcome. And hopefully someday in the very near future, we will be able to get together physically and break bread and have conversation and have dialogue together as it was meant to. And I want to also just mention, Zoom is great. I wish I had bought stock in Zoom back last February. I'd probably be a couple dollars richer at this point if I had done that. Who knew the game would change like it did a year ago? But Zoom will never replace face-to-face conversation and face-to-face interaction. We use these tools because we must. We want to stay safe until everybody is, until this, the world and the country get to a better place with regard to this pandemic. But I am looking forward to the day when I can be back in your company. So I'm not sure if you can hear it, but number one, full disclosure, I'm not the chef in my family. Okay, I'm gonna put that out there. When Malika asked me to do this, I said, well, can I just make a cup of tea or something? And, we break bread and we just have tea and have conversation. But I think Malika was like, Charles, come on. You can do better than that. You're a grown man. You can find something that you can prepare. Malika was gracious enough to even offer me to just go get something and fake the funk like I prepared it and just put it on camera and be like, yeah, I made this. I didn't do that because I want this to be authentic. I don't think we have much to learn by fronting, for lack of a better term, for one another. So I have some food that's cooking. I'm going to explain to you in just a few seconds what I have that's being prepared. But before we do that, I want to just check in with the chat box, and I want you to. It's very rare that people ask you how you're doing and actually mean it. You know, think about how often people ask you how you're doing, but they immediately go back to whatever it is they're doing, right? How you doing, Charles? And then they go back to whatever it is they're doing. I genuinely want to know how folks are doing. So if you could indulge me by typing in the chat box, one or two words that describe how you're feeling right now. And it doesn't have to be all warm and fuzzy. Maybe you're angry. Maybe you have some anxiety. Maybe you are just dealing with some things. Stressed, I see right there from Ketz. Sensational, absolutely, that's great. If you are optimistic, just let us know how you're doing. Mentally exhausted, great. Blessed and determined. Content. I'm feeling so happy to be here. Thank you. I'd like to think I'm a nice person. Thank you, Jordan. Stressed but blessed. Yeah. Tired. Absolutely. Those of us who are trying to navigate this pandemic, trying to navigate work and raising children and having a family, you can be extremely tired as well. I understand that. And keep those coming. Hungry but eager for the conversation. I wish there was a way that I could get the food that I'm preparing to all of you. I wish there was some technology that existed that would allow me to do that. But for now, we're just gonna have to share recipes and figure out how we can break bread later. So last thing I'll say in terms of just some housekeeping stuff, and I wanna get into it because I wanna make sure we have time to have conversation. There's a couple other things that I like to add into workshops and discussions. It's one of my rules is called I don't even want to call it rules. We'll call it a framework. One of the things I like to do is have something we call oops and ouch. When we're having conversations around these issues or around really any issues, we want to make sure that we acknowledge and affirm other people in the room. And I am no better than you. I know Malika read my credentials and that's all well and good. It's great to have degrees. But at the core, I'm a human being just like all of you. I'm not speaking to you from some perch of intellectual superiority. I am here to learn from you, and I hope that you're here to learn from me. With that said, if I or anybody on this Zoom call says anything that may offend you or anything that may not be kosher and it just may not sit well with you, let us know, okay? Just type in the chat box, ouch. That way we can address it, or at least we know that there's something that was said that might have offended some folks. And this is not about being politically correct or overly sensitive. It's about affirming that people have different experiences, different lived experiences, and we have to affirm that those experiences matter too, okay? Ouch is basically the same thing. It's just that if you say something and you immediately realize or recognize that it's not the right thing to say, or it may be misconstrued or not perceived properly, you just say, oops. Okay, does that sound fair? Grateful for my presence. Thank you, Dr. Love. I appreciate you, Mr. Banks. Altruistic and hungry. Yeah, good. Okay. All right, so let's jump right in. How many people in the room know who Ruby Bridges is? Do you know who Ruby Bridges is? And if you're on camera, you can raise your hand. If you want to put it in the chat, okay? No, but I'd love to learn. That's why we're here, absolutely. Okay? Okay. Now, I'm starting with Ruby Bridges because I want to build a framework for this conversation. And I want to make sure that people understand, because it's often lost in the translation. When we talk about the civil rights movement, that might seem for some people like it was a long time ago. Ruby Bridges was a young woman who you've probably, even if you don't know who she is, you've probably seen her picture. So Ruby Bridges is the young African-American lady. She probably was about 8 or 9 at the time, if I'm not mistaken. She was escorted into her school in New Orleans in 1960 by federal marshals, armed federal marshals, because of the threat of, they were desegregating schools, they were integrating communities, and there was a real threat of violence against this little 9-year-old girl. Okay, so you've probably seen that picture. She's walking into the school, she's determined, she's ready to learn, she's ready to do her part, and she's not looking for anything other than her education as a young woman. Ruby Bridges today is only 66 years old. So put that in some context. That is somebody who was very much alive and well. 1960 is a long time ago. What does that have to do with anything? Zach, that's a great question. We're going to get to that. We're going to get how all these things connect. I'm glad you asked that. Ruby Bridges is 66 years old. Okay? To put that in some context, somebody said they were born in 1960. Our current president, okay, is 12 years older than that. Okay, so let's try to build a framework for the fact that these things that we're talking about were not that long ago. I'll ask you another question. Who knows who John Lewis is? And you can type it right into the chat box. Who knows who John Lewis is? Okay, John Lewis is somebody who we obviously recently lost just last year, an icon among civil rights leaders, really an icon among leaders in general. And we lost him last year. He was blessed enough to live to old age, to live to, to have made an impact and live, a great life. But when he got involved in the civil rights movement, this young man was in his teens and early 20s. Okay, so he lived a life of service, and he fought for a whole lot of things that we take for granted now. The reason why I'm bringing up these people is because you have to understand this is not that long ago. Now, who here is familiar with the Black Lives Matter movement? And I know that there's a lot of, it can be a divisive thing. There's a lot of, different feelings about it. I'm not talking about the organization and how you feel about their political ambitions. I'm talking about just the phrase Black Lives Matter. Would we all agree that Black Lives Matter? I would hope so. Now, when someone says Black Lives Matter, does that mean that other lives don't matter? What do you think? And you can be honest. No, not at all. No, okay, I see. Okay, no, no way. Okay, I'm glad you said that. And if people had said yes, we would address that as well. Black Lives Matter can be directly traced to the history of the civil rights movement, okay? It's a strain and a larger tapestry of movements that is all connected to social justice, okay? So when folks talk about Black Lives Matter, when they talk about, how does that connect to what happened 50, 60 years ago, it's all interconnected. The Black Power movement, there's a new film on HBO currently, Judas and the Black Messiah. If you have heard about it, I would strongly recommend that you see it. It's about Fred Hampton, who was a Black Panther leader. It was, not that long ago, 1968, that he was assassinated at the age of 21. So we're talking about people who changed society for the better that didn't even live to see their 25th birthday, people like Fred Hampton, okay? And I see a little bit of banter in the chat, that's okay. I understand that, but we're gonna keep it community. We're gonna keep it above the belt. Now, just let me take a side note. I told you before I was preparing something, so I'm gonna go check on it. And then actually, you know what? I'm gonna bring you with me and see if you can see it. All right, so I'm not sure if you can see that. That is an air fryer, okay? Now, I know that air fryers have become kind of this trendy thing, but I can assure you, when I'm talking about the air fryer, it's because there are different ways to prepare food that sometimes can be a little bit more healthy for everybody. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna flip this fried chicken that I have in the air fryer. Okay, very simple. Does anybody have an air fryer? And I do feel like I'm on a cooking show right now, so bear with me. Okay, so we have the air fryer. We're flipping the fried chicken. Why are we doing it in the air fryer? Less oil means a little bit more healthy. Okay, so it's a great alternative to fried chicken that cuts down your calorie intake. Okay, all right, so I'm putting this all back in. Okay, power it on. 10 minutes. Set it to chicken because that's makes it easy. Okay. All right, perfect. All right, so back to the conversation. So Black Lives Matter. I know that there's some, there's some different opinions about the organization. Set that aside. What we're talking about is just the theme, the statement, Black Lives Matter. And I think we can all agree on that. How does that tie into what came before? As I mentioned, the Black Power movement. Okay, we're talking about folks like Malcolm X, like the Black Panthers, like people who were trying to instill a sense of confidence in African-American people. And if you know our history, you know that there's a lot of history where we were not given that. We were not instilled with confidence. You can watch documentaries and read lots of books about the menstrualization of African Americans, about negative portrayals of African Americans that continue until this day. So anything that was about affirming and empowering African Americans was something that we embraced during that time. And for me, that's all Black Lives Matter is really about. It's about making sure that folks understand that white lives matter, of course, gay lives matter, everybody's lives matter, but we matter too. And I think that sometimes it gets lost in the conversation. As I see there's some banter going on in the chat room, just keep that in mind. That it's not about putting one group over anybody else. It's about making sure that people are affirmed in their right to live as well. Okay, let's try to keep it on track, folks. Okay, I know that there's some little bit of debate going on. You're all familiar with Malcolm X. You're all familiar with Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers. These young men, and I say young men for a reason, none of them lived to be age 40. Does that surprise anybody? And I see Dr. Banks has Malcolm X in his background, and as well as Nelson Mandela. None of these men lived to be age 40. Malcolm X was assassinated at 39. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated at 39. Medgar Evers was assassinated at 37. Okay, I am older than Medgar Evers ever lived to be. And next year or this year, I'll be the same age as Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. These were young folks. These are young people who, in some ways, knew that they were going to give their lives for this cause, for this struggle. I'm gonna ask that folks, try to keep the dialogue, somewhat respectful. It's a little bit distracting for me, just on a side note. So I understand people have different, we're going to be respectful. I understand folks have, very strong opinions on certain things, but let's make sure we are hearing and listening to one another. Zach, we affirm everything you're saying, and we all know Thomas Sowell, and he's a brilliant scholar, but let's try to stay on track. Let's try to find the commonality in the conversation, because this is not meant to be a debate, okay? It's meant to be a discussion, okay? Little Rock 9. I'm just naming different people and different folks that you may or may not be familiar with that will frame the conversation around youth activism. Little Rock 9, just folks that were trying to go to school, were trying to just get their education. These are folks that were met with resistance. I'm sure that you may have seen some of these old pictures, old footage, old video footage of, young African Americans, going into schools, being spit on, having rocks thrown at them, all these different horrible things, just for wanting to get an education, okay? Think about that for a second. That type of resistance to just wanting to get an education. And if you think back even further, if you go back to the transatlantic slave trade, the triangular trade, think about the penalty for teaching your slave how to read, how to write. All these things that we take for granted were denied to us. Think about what that does to a people generationally. Think about what that does in terms of generational trauma and people going through things even today Think about what that means, what the implications of that are. And that's without even going into policies that were put in place that were deliberately designed to subjugate certain groups of people. And that's irrefutable. That is not something we can even debate. We can debate the impacts of certain things, but we can't debate that this was a country that at one point considered African Americans subhuman, 3/5 of a human being. This is all language. Justice Taney once said, the Negro race has no rights that we are bound to respect. Okay? All these different things. And if there's anything you take from that, is that those things have tentacles, those things branch out over generations, and those things leave legacies. Okay? Most of us are here in Suffolk County, right? Are we familiar with Robert Moses? Have we heard of Robert Moses before? Okay. Robert Moses was an individual who is responsible for much of the urban planning in Long Island and the boroughs, okay? We know the Robert Moses Causeway. We know all these different things that have his name on it. There were certain things set up on Long Island to make sure that races didn't mix. Yeah, Robert Moses Beach, absolutely. Yeah, same person, Jordan, absolutely. And I'm not here to trash, a deceased individual. I'm here to give you the history, okay? I'm here to tell you about some of the decisions he made that were deliberately trying to keep people separated. And you live, and I'm not sure if you guys realize this, but you live in one of the most segregated suburbs in the country. Okay, that is a fact. That's irrefutable. If you look at certain communities and the things that they lack in the school districts that they have and certain lower socioeconomic status communities, that's all by design. Okay, so when we get into youth activism, you have to, as young people, think about what is it that I can do to make sure that these types of things don't happen anymore. Dr. Love, you nailed it. Yeah, if you look at the low bridges on the Southern State Parkway, that's by design. Okay, that's to keep the quote unquote poor folks off Long Island. Okay, Bellport is a great example. I'm glad somebody brought that up. I was raised in that community. I know that community very well. Literally, the haves and the have-nots. Okay, North Bellport is very different from Bellport Village. Okay, and anybody who's been there and spent any amount of time there knows that. Now, what I want to do just for a minute is, I see a lot of banter in the chat. I've been doing a lot of talking. Why don't you guys tell me, what are some of the issues that you think are most important right now? And again, we have to remember that respect rule. We have to remember that we're here to learn from one another. What are some of the things, what are some of the challenges that you think exist? And we'll keep it to Suffolk County, but you can also branch out and go nationally or statewide. What are some of the challenges that you feel exist right now in your lives? And what do you feel can be done? Because I think that's the point of this talk is, what can we do? The landfill in the town of Brookhaven. Yep, and I live in the town of Brookhaven. My mother lives in the town of Brookhaven. All of these things are very near and dear to many of us. Absolutely. Environmental racism. Dr. Banks, I'm glad you brought that up, because if you remember several years ago in a park called Timberline Park in Brentwood, remember when they were dumping waste products in that park in a predominantly Latino area in Brentwood? Would that happen in Northport? Would that happen in Dix Hills? I don't know. So when we talk about environmental racism, why was it okay? Why was it okay to poison a town of predominantly Latino individuals and think that that would be okay? Nobody would say anything and nobody would complain or have any issues with that. And they have since gotten rid of a lot of that waste and renamed that park Roberto Clemente Park. But why did it take that? Okay. Other examples, Michigan, Flint, Michigan, the water crisis. You talk about environmental racism, a governor, town council, a legislature making decisions to take shortcuts when it comes to people's drinking water. Flint happens to be a predominantly African-American community. Okay, so these things are not isolated incidents. And I know that some folks, whenever we say things like structural racism, systemic racism, implicit bias, all these different things, I know some people, they immediately glaze over and say, well, that doesn't exist. There's a whole lot of evidence that it does. Okay, I work for legal aid. I see the disparities in the criminal justice system on a daily basis. Okay, and there's lots of reports that you can look up, that you can research, that will let you understand more deeply the fact that we have huge disparities in the criminal justice system. I'll throw out just one, and I want you to sit with this and think about this for a few minutes. On average, 2 people charged with the very same crime. One is Caucasian, one is African American. Same crime, controlling for all the factors. The African American is way more likely to be more harshly penalized for that same crime. Okay, that's what we're talking about when we talk about disparities. And if you want to talk about the prison industrial complex, if you want to talk about mass incarceration, look, there's a whole lot of people right now basically sitting in jail for marijuana charges and things like that. Meanwhile, in other states, people are getting rich in the marijuana business right now. So we start to talk about, what about restorative justice? Okay, are these people going to be helped? Are they going to be let out of prison? We don't know. School to prison pipeline, absolutely. I'm glad you said that, William. So think about Emmett Till, and I want to bring it back to the impact of young people in the civil rights movement. Emmett Till was one of the very first known martyrs, of the civil rights movement. Okay, a 14-year-old boy murdered because he allegedly whistled at a white woman. It was later proven that that wasn't even true, and she admitted that. This young man was severely beaten and killed, and he became kind of the face of the civil rights movement at that time. And his mother stressed, we need to have an open casket because I want the country to see, I want the world to see what was done to my son. Now, I want to hear from you guys. I see a lot of comments. I see many things being said. I see many conversations. It's all good. We're here to learn from one another. I want feedback. I don't want to take up all the time talking. I want to hear more from you, because we're talking about youth activism, but obviously that conversation can go in many different directions. So what is the pulse of the room right now? I see Kerry says this is alarmism to cause division between races disguised as civil rights movement speech. Kerry, I would respectfully disagree with that. I think those who forget history are condemned to repeat it. Okay, I think that if we don't talk and have discussions about what happened before us, there's no pathway forward. And I know that some of these things are hard to hear. I know that, when we talk about some of this history, it's very difficult to process. It's very difficult to have these conversations, but I think they're crucial. Okay, so I would respectfully disagree with you on that. I think it's interesting how folks react when we talk about some of the more painful aspects of Black history, because don't get me wrong, our history did not begin with slavery. And I want people to understand that as well, because a lot of times when we talk about Black history, for some people, it's slavery and then everything after that. But our history is a lot more rich. Our history is a lot more deep than that. But at the same time, you cannot talk about the Black experience in America and really the global Black experience without talking about the slave trade. It is what it is. It's part of our story. We have to affirm it. We have to acknowledge it. And we do a disservice to our ancestors. We do a disservice to our ancestors to ignore that history. So I'm not of the mind that we need to get over it. We need to move on. We need to stop talking about it because it was years ago. Like I said, the legacies of these things very much persist in society. Okay, they were still desegregating schools into the 80s. That's well within my lifetime. Okay, so it needs to be said. A lot of people were slaves. So let's have that conversation. Okay, it really becomes kind of a situation where if it makes you uncomfortable, maybe this is not the conversation for you. Okay, and I say that respectfully, because if this was a presentation about other types of oppression, if this was next month and we were doing something related to women's history, I doubt that would be the response that folks would give. So we need to.
Yes, I'm so sorry, Charles. You've been doing a fantastic job, but I must talk.
Yes.
Keep your comments respectful. We are all here to learn. If you are not here to learn, then there are other activities that you can put your energies to. With that said, If you are not respectful with your comments, I'm putting my mom voice on now. If you're not respectful with your comments, we will remove you. Thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Charles.
That's totally okay. And again, this is the community, and these are painful conversations, and these are things that we have to talk about. And I was talking to someone earlier, and they asked me, why don't you move on from it? Why do you want to have these conversations? I have these conversations because my mother, who is in her 70s, remembers all this stuff very well, and she's alive and well and doing great. Okay, so I can't just pretend as if this is not part of my story as an African-American 38-year-old male who lives in New York but has that history. Both of my parents grew up in Jim Crow. Okay, my mother has told me stories about being denied entry to libraries. And think about what that does to a little girl who is now a grown woman. Think about the types of trauma that she's seen just in her lifetime. And when I'm glad, Malika, you said that. We can't get into this kind of game of one-upsmanship where if I get on a Zoom for Suffolk County Community College and start talking about the history of activism and the history of the civil rights movement and how that connects to Black Lives Matter and all these different things, if that causes you to get defensive, if that causes you to say, well, actually, or these folks were slaves as well, you owe it to yourself to figure out, why do you have that type of visceral reaction to this? Okay? If I was doing a talk about indentured servitude among the Irish, guess what I would do? I would do the same exact thing I'm doing now. I would say some things and I would listen and I would engage and I would want to know about that history. So I don't understand why folks get defensive whenever African-American or Caribbean or Black history is being discussed. Folks need to do some internal recognition within themselves and try to get to the bottom of why that is your reaction. Why is that your knee-jerk reaction to anything Black? Okay, and that's just a question I'm putting out there. I'm not trying to attack anybody or come for anybody, but I want folks to get to a better place. I want our world to get to a better place. We have to discuss these topics. We cannot talk about mass incarceration today. We can't talk about police brutality, racial profiling, implicit bias. We can't talk about all these things without talking about the history that formed all those things. And if you're a Caucasian and you're on the call and you feel as though you're being attacked, let me be the first to say that is not the case. No one is being attacked here. Okay, I want to make that clear. No one is saying that you are responsible for any of these things. No one is saying that you own slaves or anything like that, or that your privilege in the world is no. We're saying that as a community, as a family, Black, white, Latino, Asian, Indian, gay, straight, transgender, we have to come together as a human family and fix these issues. We cannot kick that can down the road and say, well, my son who's 2 will fix that when he gets older, or that'll be fixed later on, or we've already achieved the post-racial society. Remember, we elected an African-American president in 2008. So racism has been solved. It's all over. We can go, this is a utopia now. Unfortunately, that's not the world we live in. So we have to come together. So let's try to focus that conversation around, again, the point of the talk. What can we do? And I'm reading these comments and I'm seeing so much great stuff from folks. What are some strategies that we can employ to make a change in the world? I mean, Black Lives Matter was just a few Black women who were tired of seeing young Black men killed by the police. And again, if you're on the call, that's not an anti-police statement. Okay, this is not about being anti-police. I'm not anti-police, but we have systemic and structural issues within policing in this country. I just read a report the other day that talked about not a young man now, but a man who spent 20 years in jail because he was coerced into a false confession to a murder. Think about that. Think about spending 20 years in prison for a murder or a crime you did not commit, and then coming out and having someone say, my bad. Someone took 20 years of your life and that's all you get in return, a pat on the back. And there are so many stories like that. There are folks even from Long Island that have gone through those types of stories. There are folks sitting in jail right now for crimes they didn't commit. There are folks that were lynched years ago for crimes they didn't commit. So this is history. That's all we're doing is we're talking about history. So, okay, let's get to some of this. So now that we got, so
you have two hands up. One was from Empress, and then one was from Gail.
Yes. I don't know if I can unmute, but Empress, I'd like to hear your question and dialogue with you. So Malika, I think if you can unmute Empress.
Oh, I thought they can.
Oh, okay. I think she's there. Okay.
Okay.
Empress, you there?
Topic. Can you hear?
Yes, we can hear you.
Number one, Malika Lockhart is my sister, my blood sister. So I know the cause and I know the structure and the intention behind it all. It's not like, you know, it's not malicious. And this discussion may not be easy to digest, but if you're trying anything new, your taste palette is going to be going off the wall. It's not going to be right away adjusting to this new topic or this new taste, if you want to use that analogy. I think that everybody should work on responding because we are all so triggered, and being triggered is not always a bad thing, but we all get so triggered and we wind up reacting, which is more on an emotional base. And it causes you to be disrespectful when you're just trying to find a way to get your opinion across. In the open discussion, where my sister has spent many hours planning this, making sure we got a young gentleman in front of us, not only giving us an educational class, but going to teach us how to season some food and how to make something for ourselves because we're young adults. It shouldn't be turned into something like, well, I want to force what I think. I want to force what I think, because if that's the case, then it will just be a full world of you. And that's not very colorful, so to say. So if we can redirect into responding, I hear what you're saying. I'm taking in what you're saying. Now let's turn a table where you can hear me. That's how you respond to things. All this reaction or trying to cause a reaction, which is kind of gaslighting, is not okay. I got here muted because I knew the reaction in me wanted to get things started. Because I'm supporting my sister, number one. I'm supporting my sister. I was supposed to be doing a whole bunch of skin routine, but I'm supporting my sister. And when you started talking, you gave me information about Long Island that I didn't know all about. You gave me information about things that happened 60 years ago, which I must say, very true. It's not lightly sprinkled. It's not going to be sweet to your palate. It's going to be difficult to digest. My mom was in school and saw different, like, what do they call it? Fountains for Black and white people, coloreds and white only. So it's not that far away. Sometimes I can't take hearing history like this, but in other ways, I know this to move to the same things. And that's it. That's all I want to say. I want to continue learning. Watch yourselves, then. Everybody has to be accountable for themselves. Watch yourselves and have respect for each other.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. I definitely, like you said, I think there's a certain, I don't know what you can call it, but I think there's a certain uncomfortability with certain conversations. I'll give you an example. If you ever get a chance to visit the National Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., I would strongly encourage you to do so. It's powerful. It gives you a real sense of history and what happened to folks and how anti-Semitism has affected the world for a long time, and how that whole situation went down. And you will leave feeling empowered to be a voice that will never allow something like that to happen again. And the whole time I was in that museum, not once did I think, you know, they should get over it. They should probably move on from it. That was a long time ago. Why we need to always talk about the Holocaust. We need to always talk about Japanese internment camps during World War II. We need to always talk about the fact that this world still has a deep-rooted issue with misogyny and hatred of women. You know, not to be dire, but as I'm speaking, there's probably a young woman being sex trafficked in this, not even just the world, in this county, in this state. These are issues that matter, and they're all interconnected because they all relate to humanity. And they all relate to making sure that those of us who are able-bodied folks and that can be soldiers in a fight for justice for everybody, we have to take up our intellectual arms and be soldiers in that fight. So thank you, Empress. I really appreciate that you said that, because we needed to hear from folks, and I'd like to hear from more folks. So I know there's some hands up. So, Mike.
Hey, I just wanted to agree with Empress and stand my side, but also, like you were saying, these are important topics to talk about because history repeats itself very often. And like Dr. Love was saying, you're not responsible for the history, but you are if you ignore it when it happens, like he was saying. So basically, like you're saying, there's a genocide going on right now in China against Uyghur Muslims. A lot of people might not even know about that because the U.S. just said it was like a genocide like probably a couple weeks ago, but it's been happening for over 3 years. So like to learn Black history is not just for Black people or to switch like I feel like Dr. Love was saying they're scared to lose their elevated status like white privilege and stuff like that, but it's not to try to like bring Black privilege or to be better than anyone. Like Black Lives Matter is like a point where we have to understand to come together and be an enlightened race. We all have to come from different perspectives and understand that we're just fighting over skin color rather than the content of the character, like Dr. King always says. So history has to be talked about, and it's very important. So for the upcoming generations, we can leave a better world and just keep living on God-given land.
Mike, thank you so much for that, brother. I appreciate that. It cannot be stressed enough, and to hear it from young college students, and for those of you that are on this call that are in college, it goes fast. You'll finish Suffolk, you might go on to another school and get your bachelor's, your master's, your doctorate, or whatever degrees you want to get, and then before you know it, you find yourself no longer in that group considered youth. Okay, it happened to me, it'll happen to you, but it doesn't matter what your age is. You can always have an impact, and your voice matters. We didn't even get a chance to talk much about voting. And I know that people have a lot of issues with voting, but that is a revolutionary act. Okay. I know it doesn't always seem like that, but voting is just one way of many to have your voice heard. And I want to stress that, don't just vote every 4 years. Okay. And don't get discouraged when your quote unquote person doesn't win an election, okay? Because ideas matter more than politicians. Ideas matter more than individual people, okay? What happened in this country on January 6th was a disgrace, okay? I remember watching it, I was working from home, watching it on the TV, and you're seeing people in our capital, in voting local elections, Chip, absolutely. You see people in our capital carrying Confederate flags. We talk about being triggered. The Confederate flag is deeply triggering for a lot of people. Okay, think about what that represents, what that history means to people. Those people in our Capitol building that's supposed to be the people's house, those folks marching because they were unhappy about the results of an election. And I remember watching CNN and all the news reporters saying, I can't believe this is happening in our country. And for some of us, we were like, well, do you know your history? Because these types of things have always happened in our country. And they've always been people who, and again, I'm not trying to politicize this talk and take any sides. I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat or a liberal or progressive or a socialist, I really don't care. But there are certain things, certain universal values that we have to stand up for. And if you're carrying the Confederate flag, I can instantaneously know that you're not standing up for the values that are important for me. Okay, William, is that a hand up? If so, please unmute yourself.
How y'all doing? I'm Will Allen. Shout out to Christy Banks for letting me be here. She sent me the link. That was, a great conversation. Shout out to you for handling everything that you've been doing phenomenally. And Finn, just met her. She's great. Shout out to everybody for being in the conversation. I'm an alumni from Suffolk. And I just wanted to pose a question because you definitely educated me on some things about Long Island. I've been living here for like about 10 years now, about Bellport. I just moved to Shirley, and Bellport's right there. So I'm just like, I had no idea. My thing is, after we get educated, because that is the first step in activism, is the first step in being an ally. How would you say us as being here in Suffolk County, Long Island, how would you say, what would be the steps for us to start helping that change? Obviously voting locally is definitely one of those things, but how do you think we can go about, bringing about that change? We can protest, but other thing, like other situations, things like that. How would you think we can go about doing, making that change?
Great question. First thing I would do is find folks that are like-minded and organize. Okay, grassroots organization, get people mobilized around whatever it is the issue. That's how Black Lives Matter. That's how all these different movements started. Civil rights movement started in somebody's basement when the young folks said, this is not right. We have to do something about these things, and then you grow it from there. So that would be the first thing I would do, is just find people who are empathetic and sympathetic to your cause, and organize and figure out who you need to get in the room with in order to make change. And if that is a councilman, if that is a legislator, if that's an assembly person, the word lobbying is used as a bad word, dirty word sometimes. I've lobbied before. People hear the word lobbying and think that it means that it's like, I'm from Big Tobacco and I'm lobbying Congress because I want it to be legal for people to smoke cigarettes all over, and I want to sell cigarettes to kids. No, that's not what lobbying is necessarily about. It can be, because lobbying is whatever issue is important to you, and certain people have certain interests. But if there's an issue that you feel passionately about, you make your voice heard with a large number of people, as large as you can get, and go up to the Capitol. We tend to forget that the Capitol up in Albany is a public building. We can go up there, we can meet with officials, we can tell them our concerns. If they're not responsive to those concerns, we can organize a campaign to try to get them out of office. Okay, again, I'm not taking political sides here, but some of these folks get reelected every 2 years. I'm talking about Congress people, I'm talking about senators, I'm talking about just anybody who's in a position of power. You know why they get reelected? Is because turnout is always low. Okay, of the people that are eligible to vote in any given election, usually only about 30 to 35% of those people actually vote. So imagine if you got enough people together to say, you know what, we think so-and-so is doing a terrible job. We have somebody that we want to put in that place. And if we mobilize and organize a grassroots campaign, and we do that enough, we think we can get that person on the ballot, and we can get them elected, and we can get turnout high. There you go. Shout out to Stacey Abrams. Shout out to Stacey Abrams, because Stacey Abrams, if she doesn't get some type of job in the cabinet or some type of props, she is single-handedly responsible in terms of voter mobilization and voter turnout in Georgia for helping Joe Biden win that state, which obviously helped carry him to winning the presidency. And we can even talk about back during the primaries, the African-American vote in South Carolina, organized by James Clyburn, helped Joe Biden win that state. Joe Biden had not won a primary until that point. I myself, a year ago, thought Joe Biden was out of there. I was posting jokes on Instagram like, Joe Biden is out of there. He's gone because he can't win a state. And guess what? Black people came through for Joe Biden, so he's got to come through for us. Right. And if he doesn't, if we don't hold him accountable and hold his feet to the fire, that's on us. So I know that's a long-winded way of answering your question, but you got to organize, you got to mobilize, and you got to get people together that think not necessarily all alike, but like-minded people when it comes to how do we move forward on these issues. You don't have to agree on everything, but positive people can make a lot of positive change when they do it together.
Yes. I think we have a question from Ketz.
How's it going, guys? I see, a lot of positive talk. I'm Lorenzo, good friend of Ketzia's, and the conversation's been pretty powerful, but I think we really need to understand a lot of things as far as whether we're making progress. And the political talk is great, but I think we've been living under a facade as a people, as a Black folks, as a whole country, a facade that we're actually free. And just because we want to make progress doesn't mean we're actually making progress. I think as our family structures, that's one of the markers you could tell if we're actually doing better or not. And family-wise, when I was younger, we had a lot more families that were successful relationship-wise. We get along worse now. So I think that's one of the things we need to really focus on. And another thing is, I'm not a Trump fan or a presidential fan as far as the political arena, but Trump showed us a lot about this country that we thought we knew, and it made us understand things that were in place that we thought we had passed a long time ago. So, that's all I wanted to say. See what you think.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate that. I agree with a lot of what you just said. I do think that there's a level of, a lot of times we feel pacified. I'm not sure if that was what you're getting at, in terms of, we get a symbolic victory here, we get a symbolic victory there. So they kind of pacify us with certain, and a lot of times it's the symbolic stuff it's great. It creates a dialogue, but it doesn't move the needle in terms of social change. We've seen some things around, they changed Aunt Jemima. She's not going to be on the syrup bottle anymore. And that was great for a conversation around menstrualization and representations of African Americans. But is it going to keep us from getting killed by the police? Okay, is it going to keep us from, is it going to lessen the academic achievement gap that exists between African American students and non-African American students? So I totally agree with you. There's a lot of things that we have to do, and it's not just at the political level. It's multifaceted. So thank you for that. I just want to quickly, before I forget, and I don't know if you guys can see it, I want to make sure that you are able to see my masterpiece here. All right, so air fried chicken. Okay, that's going to be dinner for my wife and my son. But the reason why I have to say, and it does look good, I have to say, the reason why I chose to do air fried chicken is because it eliminates the need for the traditional way we fry chicken is a lot of oil, and it's delicious and I love it, but it's not necessarily great for your health, your cholesterol. It's a lot of calories. Well, thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. Yeah, air fryer is definitely healthier. And look, I know the air fryer has become this trendy thing where people they act real bougie when they have an air fryer, like, oh, you don't air fry your food? Oh God, and they scoff at you. But I'm telling you, my wife, who's a much better cook than I, has made some delicious meals with the air fryer. I have done some things with the air fryer, and I'm telling you that we as a community, and I don't just mean African Americans or Black folks, but really I'm specifically talking to us right now. But all of us need to be more mindful about what we're putting in our bodies. And I'm not saying you can't have fried chicken the old-fashioned way, because it's delicious. I get it. I have it sometimes myself. But we have to start thinking about healthier options, and we have to stop looking at folks who want to eat healthier as if they're doing something wrong or they're acting different. My sister, we grew up eating meat. We all love meat. My mother's a fantastic cook. She's the best human being I know in life, and I love her food, and it's all great. But when my sister decided that she was going to kind of cut back on meat, that was difficult, because a lot of times in our families, we might see that as like a rejection of the traditional cuisine that we eat. It's not. It's just about wanting to do something a little bit healthier. It's not a repudiation of anything that we had growing up. It's just about, what can I do as another alternative, as another option. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be vegan or vegetarian. But by all means, there's some great vegan dishes, vegan options. They even have vegan fried chicken. I've had it. It's delicious. There's lots of things you can do if you want to switch your diet up and try to, reduce your calorie intake, and just do some things differently, so that we can live longer and healthier. And it doesn't mean, you go all out and you just like give up everything. If that's what you want to do, that's fine too. But it just means that there's different options. Okay, so maybe one night for dinner, you have a dinner that doesn't include meat. Some people would just scoff at that and say, oh, well, how do you not have a protein? How do you not have a meat? That's fine. There's lots of other sources of protein. There's lots of things you can do. It's just about switching it up, making it comfortable for everybody, and being amendable to what people like to eat. If you have somebody over your home and they say, hey, I'm vegan, or, please, nothing an animal, nothing cooked in any type of animal oil or fat, you affirm that and you say, sure, let me figure out what I can prepare for my vegan friend, for my pescatarian friend. Don't have people over your house and then force them to eat what you eat. Food is the best. That's why I love Malika's idea with this, because food is the best conversation starter that we have. And there's a lot of good cultural conversations that can come out of food. So that was my air fried chicken. Really quickly, what I did was, you just get some chicken wings, regular raw chicken wings from the store. If you really want to get fancy, you can leave them in buttermilk for like a day. I'm not doing all that. I'm a working parent. I don't have time for all that. My wife has done that because she's just amazing in so many ways. If I'm cooking, it's usually, I ran to the store up the block and got some chicken wings. You don't need the oil. You can use olive oil if you want, but basically there's a lot of different recipes. The recipe I used for this was just a little bit of olive oil to help the flour stick onto the chicken. And then you can put breadcrumbs if you like, if that's your taste. Oh, let me take a step back. Season the meat, please. Season your meat, season your chicken. You have to do that. Do that before anything. Wash it if you feel comfortable doing that. Wash it, season it. Season to taste, salt, paprika, pepper, Old Bay, adobo, whatever it is you like. There's lots of, Chip said, lots of healthy flour options. But that recipe is simple. So you season it, put some olive oil on it if you want to do a little bit more healthier. Dredge it in the mixture of seasonings and flour, and then just put it in the air fryer at 360 degrees or 370 degrees for 10 minutes. Flip it at the end, another 10 minutes. If you still see the white of the flour, you might need some more time. So you might do an extra 5 minutes or so. Don't overcook it, don't burn it. But it's a very simple recipe, and you can kind of put that with anything that you might want to have. So you may want to have some steamed vegetables with the fried chicken, whatever you want to do. It's just a simple weeknight recipe for folks that are not looking to, throw down in the kitchen for, hours, because most of us, even if you're working from home, your work day does not stop until 5:30, sometimes later. So we need options that are quick. And I cooked 6 pieces of chicken just now. This entire thing with prep probably took maybe 40 minutes, if that. So it's very easy to do. Again, an air fryer is a trendy thing. It's a lot like a convection oven, so it's not necessarily a new phenomenon. But if you can get yourself an air fryer, and they have ones that are smaller, that are cheaper options, but still work just as well. Lots of things you can do with an air fryer that will help you to cook. It's funny, I actually did not buy my air fryer. My mother-in-law bought our air fryer for us as a Christmas gift 2 years ago. So if you can get something as a gift, I know, lucky, right? If you can get something as a gift, and my mother-in-law, my family is just beautiful people. I think my sister might even be on this call. My mom, I think, is on this call. There are lots of things you can do. And if you have a roommate, maybe you can pull your money together and get one, okay? Lots of different options. So that was my dish. And Malika, I hope that looked okay. If it had burnt, I would have just said, you know what, we're not gonna do that. I'm gonna move on to another part of the presentation if it had burnt. But I can tell you that it came out very well, and hopefully it will taste well as well.
It looks great. Thank you so much for showing us that healthier option. I see Dr. Love has his hand up, and Chip had his hand up. Did you still want to say anything?
Well, just a very quick statement. Charles, you are wonderful, as you always have been, and thank you so much for your presentation. I thought that, it takes us back when you were a Suffolk student. I recall all of that good stuff. Thanks again for coming. But I wanted to say something about the conversation people were having about having a difficulty talking about these topics of discrimination and bias and racism. And I mentioned some things in the chat about white fragility and things like that. But more importantly, a lot of people are socialized, or all of us have been socialized to have those kinds of biases and beliefs by things like what you spoke about in terms of some of the food stuff like Aunt Jemima and everything that kind of debilitates or sublimates people. And it's hard for people to get past that and not continue with their own or their old values. That's why we all, in my opinion, have to work so hard to let people know that we're not blaming them for what happened in the past. We're in this love together, and we're trying to, all of us, make the change to move to a place where we're not going to do that stuff now, because that's the only thing we have power over is today and subsequently tomorrow as a result of today. But we can't do anything about, can't change what happened yesterday. We can only do something about today and the future by what we do today. So once again, that's just a repeat of the things that you are saying, all right? And just saying it in different words, because I know that a lot of people just don't understand. This ain't about attacking them. This is about us trying to find our way to a better place in the future, and now and in the future. And we do that by acknowledging our faults. And all of us have some of those faults. All of us do. So we all have work to do. Of course, the Blacks have been subject to it very, very immensely, as you indicated in the program. But all of us have biases and faults that we need to work on overcoming. And that's a full-time job for the rest of our lives.
Absolutely. Yeah. Dr. Banks mentioned,
complete.
I mean, if we're talking about, and we didn't get into this, and this could be another conversation for another day, but implicit bias is something that we all struggle with. And I want to make sure that I say that we really do all struggle with that. And it's not that, I think a lot of times people will hear certain concepts and think that it's only being applied to them. When I talk about privilege with folks, when I talk about implicit bias, that applies to me as well. Okay, I have privileges in my own right. Being a male in this society gives me a measure of privilege over folks. And being from a two-parent middle-class household where, you know, I had two parents who worked damn hard to give me a life, to give me a good start in life, that, you know, I've worked with many young men, many people who do not have that. Okay, so that's a measure of privilege. In this country, there's no way we can talk about privilege without talking about, you know, racial privilege or white privilege or whatever you want to call it. You know, we're coming from, I mentioned it earlier, we're coming from a time where, you know, we were considered subhuman in this country. You can look at certain communities on Long Island today and look at the language in the deed for these homes and see language that says, you know, you cannot sell this home to a Negro. Okay? Like, I think somebody's mic is on. Places like Levittown, you know, there are still coded language in those deeds that basically tell people that you can't sell to certain people. So these are things that we're still dealing with. So it's no way we can say that, you know, if you're born of there's certain unearned benefits that you get in this country, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you didn't earn what you have. I think a lot of times when we talk about privilege, folks get defensive and think, well, they're saying that I didn't struggle for what I had in life, or they're not giving me the ability to contribute to the conversation. That's not what it's about.
Absolutely. Charles.
Yeah, go ahead, Malika.
I'm sorry. Professor Daniels, did you, I see you had your hand up.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
You know, I'm listening to everyone. I hear some great stuff. The thing that it seems like that we're not talking about, we're thinking that in terms of the implicit bias that we all are kind of guilty of it. The difference is power. I think we have to talk about power. Who has the power to control generations from this point on? In other words, you know, Brother Fox, you could say you don't like a certain group of people, but you don't have the power to deal with their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, or 10 generations from before. So I think when we start accepting responsibility, let's be real about that. You know, I could not like you, but it doesn't mean I'm going to change anything. Also, this will kind of give you something to think about. A philosopher by the name of Camus, and he said, what better way to enslave a man is to give him the vote and call him free. And I think that's an interesting thing to think about. Okay, I tend to talk too much, so I'm going to be quiet, but thank you for listening.
Brother Daniels, nobody on this call would have any issue with you saying more, because I was on the call last week and I heard Sister Green and what she had to say. And I hope that some people were on that call last week. And I hope you're on the call next week and the week after that, because there's so much good information that people have to share and so much important dialogue that people can learn from. So, and Mr. Daniels, I don't know that I've had the chance to necessarily meet you or be acquainted with you, but your reputation precedes itself. So I want to thank you for just being who you are in our community. So I appreciate you. Same as Malika, same as Dr. Banks. You are somebody who is a pillar in our community here in Suffolk County, and we need you. We need you out here educating folks. So thank you for being on this call, and thank you for sharing that wisdom as well.
Please don't forget to get Chip in there. He's been trying to get in there for a while.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna just go ahead and speak now. Thank you so much, Mr. Fox, for being here, and Malika for putting this together, and Dr. Banks. And Empress, thank you for sticking up to my sister, for my sister Malika. She's definitely well loved. I just wanted to say that I'm 60 years old. I was born in 1960 in Mount Airy, North Carolina. And when I was approximately around 3 years old, I had an injury. And although we lived basically almost across the street from a hospital, it was a hospital that wouldn't allow colored people. So my family had to drive many miles just so that I could be seen by a doctor in a hospital. So for the people who think that it wasn't that long ago, 60 years is a long time ago, I'm 60 and I'm still here, and I have children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, and I want their lives to be better. And in order for their lives to be better, I have to understand and tell them from whence we came. And we came from a lot of mistreatment, and mistreatment is still going on today. And it's important that we understand that and that we try to do whatever we can to make it better for those who are living today. There's so much problems with the healthcare. Since I was talking about the hospital, there is still so many problems that Black people are not getting the health care that they need. And I really appreciate you, Mr. Fox, for talking about eating healthy and what needs to be placed in your body to eliminate some of the diseases that we are having in our community. And I just want to say thank you so much for this conversation, and thank everyone for being on this call.
Thank you, Chip. I appreciate that. And I would be remiss if I didn't, acknowledge and kind of piggyback off what you just said. I read a report today that was very, very disheartening. It focused on, obviously for the past year, we've been dealing with the pandemic, the novel coronavirus. And in that year, life expectancy for folks has gone down as a result of that. And many folks dealing with comorbidity and different things that are prevalent in our community, we obviously got hit hardest with coronavirus because of the things that are most likely to affect us. Even just from a standpoint of, we were more likely to be frontline workers. Okay, many of us were not able to. If you were able to work from home during this whole time, you are privileged, and you are very fortunate and lucky to be able to have that ability. Many of us could not do that. If folks didn't work, they didn't make money, they didn't eat. They weren't able to pay their bills, their rents, their mortgages. So that's number one. But number two is many of the issues that are most prevalent in our communities, whether it's high blood pressure, diabetes, many of the things that many of us deal with, that obviously put us at a much higher risk when it came to coronavirus. And it has made the life expectancy go down for everybody, but particularly for African Americans. And that gap between African American life expectancy, Black American, African American life expectancy, and Caucasians and our white brothers and sisters, that has gotten larger because of this. Okay, so these are all conversations we have to have. So Chip, thank you for saying that, because I love fried chicken, I love all types of food, and I don't think I'll ever give up certain things. But I want to be healthy. I want to live a long time. I want to be able to see my son graduate, get married, live his life, do all these things. And we've been hearing so many different stories of folks having heart attacks at 30. I had a friend of a friend recently had a heart attack at 38 years old. Okay. These are things that really happen. So no matter what your ethnicity or your race is, always be on top of your health to the best of your ability, because that ultimately is all we have, and we can't take anything material with us. So we have to live as good as we can while we're here, and we have to make an impact while we're here. That's why, they say, service is the rent you pay for living on earth. So ask yourself, what are you doing on a daily basis to make life better for somebody else? That's the ultimate question that drives me. That's the ultimate question that I know drives Malika, Dr. Banks, Mr. Daniels. All these folks on this call are doing this type of symposium because they care about humanity. Not Black humanity, not white humanity, not gay humanity, not straight humanity, humanity as a whole. Because ultimately, we all have to live or die on this planet together, and we got to do that together as brothers and sisters. Celery does go well with fried chicken, actually. I mean, I know it doesn't sound like it does, but you can always put a healthy option. And again, for my vegan friends, I know I think Miss Sterling is still on the call, my good friend and colleague. My vegan friends, there's vegan fried chicken, there's vegan options for folks. And we want to make sure that we affirm that no matter what your diet, there's this myth that if you have a certain diet, you can't eat well. You have to eat cardboard, you have to eat rice cakes all the time, you have to eat, no, you can eat some really beautiful and delicious meals no matter what your dietary restrictions are. You just have to be creative, and you have to be willing to try. And for me, I grew up in a household with a mother who, fantastic cook. And unfortunately, like the knucklehead that I could be at that age, I didn't pay attention. I didn't listen. I didn't say, Mom, hey, how do you make this? And I kind of had to start from behind when I started to get out on my own. I should have been paying attention to what my mother was doing, because she was teaching those lessons in the kitchen every day. And she continues to do that until this day. So, it's just about practice. It's just about, trying different things and not being afraid to fail. And full disclosure, if I had burnt that chicken, I would have showed y'all. I would have showed y'all the burnt chicken, because that's how we learn.
Did anyone have any other questions or comments for Charles? You've done an amazing job, even with a very active chat. There are people that get uncomfortable with conversations, and we understand that. My team, we kind of anticipated that. So just thank you for keeping your grace and your focus. You did an amazing job, Charles. But for the audience, is there anyone else that that had any questions or comments?
Can I say something?
Sure, Jordan.
Sorry, I forgot to raise my hand, but hi, I'm doing it now. Sorry, I forgot.
Go on.
But and I'm not showing my camera, so you don't have to like pin me or anything. But and I'm not very I'm just letting you know, I'm not very educated on everything. I'm still trying to learn every day, but I just wanted to say you're actually one of my favorite presenters in the series so far. I've done like one before. She was really good, but like honestly, you're so energetic, you're so nice. Like I can actually picture us sitting at a table and like actually eating together as a family. Like I don't do that with my family. We're always on our phones and we're not communicating with each other. And I feel like we're doing that on this Zoom, and I feel very included and very like included basically. So I'm sorry, I'm just nervous, but you're really cool. And like, yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Can you record that and send it to my wife? Because she doesn't always think I'm cool. She says that I've lost it because I'm.
No, this is actually being recorded. So yeah, I'll send it to you.
Okay, good. Jordan, I'm glad you used the word included, because that's part of what I do in my career, is I try to make sure that folks feel we have an inclusive culture and climate at Legal Aid. That's what this is about. I know certain conversations are difficult. I know passions get high. Yeah. I know that there's different ways of thinking, and different people have different opinions and ideas. But the most important thing is that folks feel included, and exactly. you can bring your whole self to the conversation. Yes. So I welcome, I welcome you anytime, we're doing something like this. I welcome anybody into that space, as long as they can maintain that one base level of respect. And everybody here has done that. So I appreciate and care deeply about this conversation.
Thank you, Jordan.
Am I allowed to elaborate on something, or are we running out of time?
Shortly, Jordan, and then we'll get to Will because I know Will has his hand up.
Oh, okay. Just quickly,
on.
like, growing up, I'm gonna admit I hated talking about racism, and I would always get like, I would be like, can we change the topic? When I was younger, but now I'm starting to realize it's an important part of our history because it's still going on now, even though it's improved and everything. It's still a problem. Like, this shouldn't be happening. Like, I get so mad talking about it because it's like it shouldn't be happening. There's no reason why people people of color shouldn't be included in everything. They're people just like us, you know. I'm sorry, I always get heated with this, but I love everybody. I think everybody deserves equal rights. I'm very passionate about it. So thank you for doing this. Just that's it.
Thank you, Jordan, and thank you for expressing yourself.
Yeah.
We were trying to create a safe space for everyone to express themselves and ask questions. So thank you for feeling safe enough to do so. Will?
Hola, can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
My connection's been really spotty. I don't know if it's me or what's going on, but I just want to say thank you to you. I've been in Suffolk in a while, but I've heard a lot of different speakers. I've been part of like a whole lot of different programs. I was in Campus Activity Board, peer mentoring, heard a lot of different speakers, but I definitely think you have been the most phenomenal and well-spoken speaker I've definitely dealt with in Suffolk, and just the way you handle different like, you know, the chat and everything. I think Finn was saying the chat, how you handled that just really well, and being able to still being inclusive to everyone and trying to not just dismissing them, even though, you know, they were saying some things. It's like, no, I'm not going to dismiss you because understand that we need to have this conversation. We need this space. And I'm appreciative to Finn and everyone else who's co-hosting to keeping the safe space, to say, you know, the safe space safe, because it definitely, conversations like these, we all get triggered. And I think somebody else said it, being triggered is not always a bad thing. It just means we're really passionate about what we're talking about. I think it's really amazing that you're just so well at controlling a room, even though it's virtual. I can just tell that when you're in a room with physical people, because I'm a poet, so I perform. I can just tell when somebody's able to control the room really well, and you do that really well. And you're really well spoken. You have like that energy. I don't remember who else said it. Like, I can just be at a table with you drinking some tea, having a good conversation. Like, you're that type of person, and you're able to make hard conversations easier digestible to people who aren't able to really like hear it otherwise. I think that's really important because those are people who really need to hear the conversation the most. And I just want to applaud you and thank you for that. And thank you to Finn and Christy and everyone else who's co-hosting this. This has been really phenomenal. I'm glad that Suffolk's doing this because I don't think we've been as active. Suffolk's been as active with you know, conversation like these since when I was there. So this is really awesome. Thank you.
William?
Thank you, Will. Thank you for your energy. And I'm sorry, Charles, but I see Dr. Love, he already jumped on you. He's like, he wants you for his poetry program. So Christy has his information. We'll connect you to.
Cool.
Okay, Charles, I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay. I was just going to say, William, thank you so much, young brother. I appreciate you. Thank you for those words.
Was there someone else? Oh, Hannah. Hannah, what would you like to say?
I don't really have like any comments. I just wanted to say thank you also for, well, Miss Malika, thank you for sending this to me. I graduated from Suffolk in 2019, so I'm in my last semester at Stony Brook right now. I'm currently taking like African studies classes, and it's really good to have like this kind of discussion again, because since like the summer when we were having like those weekly meetings, I haven't really got to do that again. So I definitely really enjoyed this. I also want to say thank you to Charles and also applaud you for the way that you handle things. I know personally me, like I get heated with that kind of stuff, but I also have to remember sometimes people might be saying things just to get a reaction. So it's like, I know people that will fight online all day with trolls, but it's like, just to keep my peace, I'm like, no, I know they're saying this for reaction. Let me just calm down, not even engage with that. And I also want to say, Charles, this is like, I don't know how many times I've heard you spoke, but quite a few times. I actually am from Bellport. I went to Bellport High School and middle school. And I remember you coming to the middle school youth summit to talk to like all the kids and stuff there. That was like a few years ago, but yeah, I've been hearing you speak for a while. So I just want to say thank you. And it's nice to engage with you again all these years later.
Thank you so much for that. It's amazing. You know, you went to the same schools I went to, and now you're a Sea Wolf. So that's a beautiful thing. Thank you, Hannah. I appreciate that. Stony Brook, you know, I know that many of you might be considering where you want to go after you finish Suffolk. I know Malika would agree. Stony Brook's a good option. I went there, my wife went there, my sister went there. Beautiful, great school. So Hannah, best of luck to you and thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Hannah. Katz, I see you. I see you. You're trying to rip through the screen like I have something to say.
Just a quick question. What's your take on the reparations talk? There's been a lot of talk on that. What's your take on that, if you don't mind, sharing or,
Well, that's a loaded question, but at a basic level, I do think that other groups have received certain types of reparations for different atrocities that have happened. We can talk about, we can debate what it looks like, whether it's monetary or anything like that. But I do think that if you look at the legacy of slavery and the legacy of things that have happened in this country, and somebody, and Chip just said it, they gave slave owners reparations. I feel like the general populace is kind of on this same mindset. I believe that has to be a serious conversation, that there has to be some form of reparations paid to descendants of American slaves. Again, I'm not speaking for my organization. I'm not speaking for anybody else but myself on that. I know it's a divisive topic, but I just think that if you look at the country as kind of a race and where people started, we as African-American Black people in this country have started so far behind everybody else because of the legacy of de facto segregation, de jure segregation, things that have happened in this country. There needs to be a consideration of, and we can call it reparations, but we can also call it a pronounced investment in the Black community, whether it's just money going into jobs, economic benefit, housing, all these different issues that affect predominantly our communities. That's by design. So there needs to be a design to kind of fix that. So I would err on the side of there needs to be a serious conversation about what that looks like. So I hope that answered your question.
Awesome, awesomely done. Were there any other comments or questions? My sis Christy is putting in the chat that if you we would really appreciate your feedback. You can be honest with us. We have tough skin. We have to look at what we're. Anyways, I digress. In any case, please give us your feedback. She's going to paste that. There it goes in the chat. She's going to paste that there. By completing the survey, you will get an appreciation package, which will also include the hashtag Good Trouble mask as shout out to in honor of our fallen civil rights icon, John Lewis. Thank you, Lori. She made these. So please provide us with your feedback of tonight's program, which also can include if you have any suggestions for further programs, please. Yes. Charles, did you have any other things you wanted to share?
Really quickly, because I know that you will not say this, y'all need to cherish and protect Miss Malika because she has been doing this amazing work for a long time. I came to Suffolk Community College in the year 2001, and she was my advisor for African American Student Union, as well as Dr. Love, Jim Banks, and all the staff at Suffolk Community College. I know the kind of perception that sometimes is out there about community college in general. Community college was one of the most important, fantastic decisions I ever made. And people like Malika and Dr. Banks are what helped make it the foundation of my academic success. And, just being there for those 2 years was life-changing. And Malika's not going to give herself all this credit. So, and Dr. Banks is not going to give himself all this credit. So I have to be the one to say, all these programs that they're doing for you virtually this month, attend as many of them as you can. They're all beneficial. I know Mr. Banks has a lot of things that are going on. Malika has programs. And partake in all of this because it's beautiful stuff. And God willing, this time next year, we'll be back together and be able to do these things. And I can shake everybody's hand and we can fellowship and we can have nothing but good vibes and positivity. So thank you, Malika, for just having me. And thank you all for letting me into your lives for this on this Thursday evening. Thank you.
Whew, so yeah, you're right. I wouldn't have said that. So but I thank you. I thank you all coming out. I understand what's going on outside. It is not pretty outside, but you could have been doing something else with your Thursday night. But you chose to come here. You chose to come here and have a serious discussion and be respectful of everyone's views. So I appreciate you all for being here. Truly, Ashe. Also, I wanted to take the time to also, this is my team, Dr. Love, as you see, he has his camera on, and my team member, my other team member, Christy Banks, right there. She's the enforcer. What you say? No. And yeah, I thank you for your energies. Give flowers always. Absolutely. I also wanted to show you, yeah, she is a treasure. We treasure her. Well, we do. Volunteermatch.org is a fantastic website that you can go to. If you put your zip code from anywhere in this country, it matches up some opportunities where you can give. Sometimes we get so bogged down in our problems that we forget that, you know what? It can't always get worse, and there are people really struggling out there. Not saying that we aren't, but if we have anything that we can give, what is it? Service is the rent we pay for a living. I think that was Shirley Chisholm. There's a couple of people that said that. But volunteermatch.org, if you would like to see, there's a way that you can give back to your community in any way. Just wanted to put that out there. Any other last comments, questions? Christy put the survey back in there. Thank you. That's that link, that long link. That's the link to the survey. Any other questions or comments? No? All right. Well, this was a lively discussion. Oh, and don't forget, we will be back here next Thursday at 6 p.m. and we're going to have the wonderful Mr. Chip Wilford presenting, talking about the role of entertainment in activism. From back when we used to, we had God rest her soul, Cecily Tyson, Harry Belafonte, and how now we have Kerry Washington. There's many. So we're going to have that conversation next week, Thursday, same time, same bat channel. So hopefully you will remember to tune in. Please be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. You know how you're kind to others? You need to be kind to yourself. And love. Okay. Good night, everyone.